All right, so I think we should be recording now. Yep, it looks like we are. All right, so I want to start by prefacing that a lot of these strategies I gathered before COVID and before all of the challenges that we're all facing right now and going through, and all of this, just this uncertain time. So I hope that some of them can be helpful to you. And Kim was very gracious to share what she found to be most helpful throughout some of the resources that I have shared with her previously. So I will go through those and then provide just some general resources that I think can be helpful, as just not necessarily things that we would want to talk through, but might be helpful to you at some point. I've been trying to build in some engagement opportunities into my presentations and to make it more of a discussion and casual, but please jump in if you have questions or if you want to talk about something, or need me to stop or slow down. It's harder to gauge on this in this virtual environment, so please feel free to interrupt. And otherwise, yeah, I'm really hoping that some of this can be helpful during this crazy time. So
I have one quick question,
yeah.
or one quick statement actually to make just before you start. How did you even decide that you were going to do a topic on self-care for caregivers for your master's or your doctoral program that you're doing?
That is a really great question. It was kind of my first year of graduate school. Well, I guess I will say, first of all, I grew up and my sister has some disabilities. And so for me, it's always been a part of my life, and thinking about the family aspect, and part of why I wanted to become a school psychologist is to think about the whole child and sort of thinking about the family as well and how we can support different family members. And then my first year of graduate school, my advisor had offered me a position to work on this initial study that she had started, focusing on stress and health in caregivers of kids with developmental disabilities. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm super interested in getting involved in that. And I was able to interview a bunch of parents of kids with disabilities, and was like, wow, this is really a huge need of trying to figure out how we can support parents and give some easy resources given all of the other demands on caring for a child with disabilities, and really trying to figure out how, not just as school psychologists, but in general, I feel like there's this whole concept of we need to support caregivers, but the how is kind of, we don't really know what's going to work the best. So I wanted to go right to the source and figure out what from folks, what is the best, most helpful things to do. So I, in preparation for preparing a lot of these resources, had interviewed some folks to get an idea for what might be helpful, what areas might be helpful to focus on, and just kind of have a resource bank, but also allow folks to be able to talk to one another and connect with other parents.
Right.
So that's really my elevator pitch for how I got interested in all of this.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Kim. All right, so the first area that I wanted to talk a little bit about, which I think is particularly important now, is emotion-focused coping strategies, because especially with all of the uncertainty in the world, we can't necessarily find solutions to a lot of the things that are going on right now. We can't identify a specific problem and come up with a solution and then it's all gone. So, that's kind of the case a lot of the time, but especially now, I feel like this is really important to talk about. So there's at the bottom of each slide, I've linked the original source. And again, we'll be sharing this, but I will go a little bit into each of the different areas. So meditation and journaling are two emotion-focused coping strategies that can just kind of help to deal with the everyday stress of a situation and to provide a little bit of relief, and just sort of a chance to regroup and have some time that's just for yourself, that focuses on kind of regulating the emotional reactions like anxiety, fear, sadness, anger, and can help, especially for those stressful situations that we're not able to change. So specifically with like meditation, that's something that you can do really anytime, anywhere. Take a couple of minutes, even if it's just 30 seconds, to take a deep breath and do some deep breathing exercises. Journaling is something that can really be done anytime or any place. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about cognitive distortions and reframing next, but I wanted to ask whether anyone has heard of any of these strategies or used them.
I'm not, go ahead.
The first two I'm familiar with, but not cognitive distortions or reframing.
Okay.
I'm not a big journaler, but I do know friends that journal a lot. So
Yes, and right, definitely.
And I know people that use it to actually go back sometimes and remind themselves of how they were feeling, to actually reel themselves in on when another problem comes up or a situation comes up later on that they know they've experienced before. They actually go back and read about it to kind of like set themselves straight again.
Wow.
Yeah, which is definitely really helpful. I know, and I probably should have said this at the beginning, but not every strategy is going to work for every person or be something that you're into. And, you know, some people, meditation is a whole different thing and can look differently. But for me, I kind of conceptualize that for myself. And when I think about meditation, is just taking some time to do some deep breathing. And so that might not be someone else's definition of meditation. They might think about, you know, sitting quietly, reflecting, doing more yoga type meditation. But I think really you can look at it in different ways, and different aspects of strategies can be helpful. Oh, did this do the same thing? Okay. I'm trying to figure out what. Okay, there we go. So these are some of the common cognitive distortions. And cognitive distortions are basically just different patterns of thinking that can lead to more stress or challenges. I have some specific kind of definitions and examples on the next slide, but these are just some of the common cognitive distortions. So even if you haven't heard the term, do any of these jump out as things that you've heard of before or heard about?
Yeah, most definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is a big part of emotion-focused coping, because really it goes back to how we're thinking about things and how we view a situation, or whether it's stressful, good, bad. It really just how we think through and process our world. So these are some of the first, and this is actually, I want to make sure I give credit. I found this Instagram account called The Brain Coach, who posts these really nice, pretty visuals and kind of did the work for me in trying to make a pretty presentation that shows a lot of the definitions of what these patterns of thinking look like. So all or nothing thinking is really that black or white, it's all good or all bad. And I think really any of us can fall into any of these patterns of thinking throughout our lives, depending on situations, but all or nothing thinking is just kind of that black or white. Overgeneralization is just having kind of one negative experience and then thinking that, you know, every other similar experience is going to be bad because that one situation was bad. Mental filtering, focusing on the negative aspects and disqualifying the positive. So, you know, 10 good things could happen in a day, and then one thing doesn't go so great. And then all of a sudden the whole day is bad when you're thinking back on it. Disqualifying the positive is pretty similar, but just sort of having that negative or pessimistic lens and looking at things. And again, I mean, I think it kind of can vary day to day. Some days, for me personally, I'm great at seeing the positive and being able to be really optimistic. And then other days it's like, oh, everything just doesn't seem great right now. So I'm going to ignore all of that because I'm in a space where things are not feeling great. And then mind reading is I think maybe not necessarily in a parent-child relationship, but I guess with older kids potentially, but jumping to conclusions, assuming that we know what someone else is thinking based off either their facial expression, their body language, their lack of a response. I think mind reading, especially in this virtual environment, is really hard because a lack of response, whether it's a text, email, whatever, or trying to read between the lines on that sort of communication without having that face-to-face, I think can be really hard to interpret. And it's really can be easy to jump to conclusions, especially when things are stressful. can anyone think of any examples of any of these that either you've observed in someone else or that you've experienced yourself?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that disqualifying the positive has happened to me many, many times. You know, you have, like you said, you have a bunch of good things happen in the day, but then one bad thing happens and everything just falls apart. You just kind of, you know, whether it's emotionally or whatever, you know, it just kind of ruins the entire thing. So yeah, that's definitely happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think mind reading is something I'm guilty of doing, making assumptions, what other people are thinking and what their perspectives are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big one. I feel like I'm probably guilty of every cognitive distortion. It depends on it depends on the day and time and what's going on in the world, especially right now. It's when it's easier to be cooped up and sitting and thinking about things. And yeah, definitely. These are some of the other cognitive distortions: personalization or blame. So blaming yourself for things outside of your control, which I think especially in this context can be really challenging, to not feel like a bad event is somehow your fault. Going into should statements, that kind of having this set of rules that either for yourself or someone else, like I should be able to do X, Y, and Z, kind of that I should be able to do it all, but without any kind of a self-imposed set of rules or systems.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I feel like, a really hard one to break out of holding yourself to a certain standard. And I think comparing yourself to other people really ties into that a lot of, you know, other people are able to do X, so I should be able to do that, when really it's about, you know, yourself and whatever works best for you.
I think that's a big thing for special needs parents too, because
Yeah.
you know, we're always doing we should be able to do what everybody else can do, or our kids should be able to do what everybody else can do, you know. So that's really, I'm sure, something that touches our lives a lot.
Yeah, that is something that, in whether it's my work in schools or my work in research, that every parent that I've talked to, that is one of the biggest challenges, is comparing either yourself or your child to whether it's other kids with disabilities or kids who are typically developing, and that struggle of setting those expectations compared to other people, that's really hard to live up to, and hard to not have that then loop back into a negative pattern of thinking and feeling discouraged or upset or guilty or angry or frustrated because that expectation's not being met, is really challenging.
Right.
Emotional reasoning is kind of focusing just on how you're feeling about a situation and not necessarily the facts of a situation. So drawing conclusions about an outcome of something based off of how you feel, as opposed to being able to look objectively and say, okay, well, so, you know, maybe this isn't so bad because this is all the information I have, instead of kind of building things up in your head. And that ties in with magnification or catastrophizing, of kind of going to the worst possible outcome and that could possibly happen, and having that be what's built up in your mind, that the reality of a situation may not be as bad as it actually seems or actually is in reality, just kind of jumping to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So Kim had some good examples of should statements and how that can apply, especially for parents of kids with disabilities. But does anyone else, or Kim, you as well, have any thoughts about any of the other ones? Any ways that you feel like that might impact you or has impacted you?
I think Mary is muted still, so she can't respond.
I'm muted, and
Oh.
also I'm thinking to myself, and I'm stuck on should statements, because I'm like, I should be able to manage one child and have a Zoom call.
Yeah, it can even be happening right now. And I think that parents of kids with and without disabilities right now, with especially younger kiddos who are having to deal with suddenly taking on all of these additional roles of being a teacher, managing homeschooling, managing behavior, having to, within the confines of your home or your community, and not having the flexibility to be able to go out and do things, or even necessarily have access to services and supports that you normally would have.
Yes.
It's really easy to fall into that. Well, I should be able to manage it all. And, especially in this time, nobody should be able to handle anything. It's not, there's nothing like this that's happened before. So I think that is a big one that's applicable.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. This is part of what's challenging. I have all of your faces on the side next to my presentations, and trying to kind of gauge without being in person can be kind of hard of when to move on. So just, again, please feel free to jump in if you want to slow down, or if you want to jump in and talk about something related to this. So these are just some.
It looks like we lost Kira. Kira suddenly, as soon as we put the slides up, she was gone. So I hope.
Oh, I see her.
You do?
I see her in there too.
I'm here.
I don't see Kira. Oh, there's Kira. Hi, Kira. Okay. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, no, we don't want to lose anybody. Well, unless you have to go, please feel free. So these were just some good examples that, again, from this Brain Coach account that puts it in a nice, pretty visual of some examples of all or nothing thinking that I think really nicely illustrate what it seems like. And I know I really identified with some of these. And I think sometimes our kids can identify with a lot of these, or get stuck in these patterns of thinking and comparing themselves to others, or, kind of it's in line with a lot of like rigid thinking, and having to kind of get out of some of that and be a little bit more flexible and get into the gray area of thinking. It can be really challenging for anyone, but especially for a lot of kids with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I see number 6 a lot of just with my own, kids, just, I can't do it, and just thrown in the towel. Like, I can't do anything,
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a big one of something's hard, or you're doing well, and then either it's an assignment's hard, or someone didn't want to be your friend, or you got into a fight with somebody, and then everything is bad. It's no longer good. Even if, all the other classes are going okay, or they had a fun interaction with somebody, or a play date, or hung out with somebody. Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or examples of all or nothing thinking?
Not so much. I mean, yes, but
Yeah,
kind of self-explanatory when you read it.
yes, definitely. These emotional reasoning I thought were interesting, because when I was trying to come up with examples of a lot of the cognitive distortions, I'm like, I really have to think about some of these. And emotional reasoning was one that's kind of hard, because it's not based on the facts, and it's based off of your own individual perception of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think these really nicely show that I feel incompetent, therefore I must not have what it takes to do this job, as opposed to, and we'll get into reframing a little bit next, but as opposed to, either I'm new at this job, or I'm just learning this aspect of this job, and I will get better at it. And I think that emotional reasoning based off of feelings is something, again, I think we all experience these, but anyone have any thoughts about the emotional reasoning? Or
I think, like, I go right back to the number 5 of, I can't do it. And just,
you get overwhelmed, and then you just think that it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely.
So reframing is really, I mean, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but so these cognitive distortions are the ways that we often think, and then reframing is to try to help us not think those ways. Is that?
Exactly. And that was a perfect segue. Thanks, Kim. So reframing is really is changing the way you look at something, and then changing your experience of it. So it's taking a stressful event or a cognitive distortion and turning it into kind of going back to looking at the facts, or looking back and kind of trying to almost step outside of yourself to look back at the situation as if you were a friend or family member talking to you and kind of talking through the situation. So it's can be really helpful in addressing the cognitive distortions. So the first step, which I didn't include on here because we started with sort of learning about some of those thinking patterns and cognitive distortion, is to really just kind of be keeping those in mind and being aware of those cognitive distortions, which kind of goes into noticing your thoughts. So just catching yourself when you're slipping into some of that overly negative and stress-inducing patterns of thinking. Because really being aware of them is a hugely important part of challenging and then changing those cognitive distortions. So when you become a little bit more mindful and observant of your thoughts, you can catch yourself in that and start to then move into challenging those and saying, so going back to the I'm incompetent and therefore I must not be able to do my job, is that really the case? Or am I a learner in this situation? Or, for a kid that I don't understand this math problem and therefore I'm bad at math and I'm never going to be able to do math. It's okay, well, maybe you're learning how to do this and you just don't have all the information yet, but we'll get there and we can work on that. And there's a solution to that problem. So I think that's really then going in and challenging those and saying, is there another option? Is that really the only option, the cognitive distortion? And then replacing it with the more positive thought of, okay, yeah, you know what? I am a learner and I will get there with practice. So I think that's really the process of reframing. And it all starts with being aware of the cognitive distortions and thinking about them and trying to practice identifying them and catching yourself, or even catching your kids and helping them to be aware of, oh, you know what? I see that, maybe we don't have all the facts in that situation. So let's go and see if we can find the facts to be able to come up with a different option. Any thoughts about reframing or any initial ideas? I've got some examples next of kind of some processes for working through reframing, but any initial thoughts or reactions to that?
I just wanted to say thank you. I'm sorry, I have to go. I actually have my
Thanks for
last
joining.
undergrad class tonight, so.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Oh, that's so exciting. Thanks so much for taking the time to join, and congratulations.
No, thank you very much.
Thanks for joining for a little bit, Kira, and I'll talk to you. And good luck with the last, and we'll celebrate after.
Thank you.
Yay.
Bye.
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 All right, great. And I have the waiting room up to see if anyone else is looking to join in.
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed that we're not getting more participation here, but oh well.
Yeah, well, it's a hard time, not just of day, but also of life right now, and
yeah.
Especially now that school is officially not going back this year. I think there's a lot of other things going on.
Yeah, this is kind of a side question, but where are you at in your finishing up your studies and your getting your master's or your doctorate?
I actually have my dissertation defense scheduled on the 29th, which is very exciting. So then I will be officially done. Thank you. Yes, it's a good feeling.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been a long time. I've been in school for a long time, it feels like. But no, it's really nice. And so then I will be officially done. I technically graduated this past weekend. UConn had a nice virtual commencement and they did a really nice job with it. But
that's
so
good. Oh, well, congratulations.
So close. I'm almost at the
so
finish
cool.
line. Yes, definitely.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So this was just, again, going back to using these brain coach, which I want to learn whatever she's using to make these cute graphics, because I think they just do such a nice job at kind of quickly showing something. So this is just an example of for all or nothing thinking, identifying the all or nothing thought, and then kind of going into kind of this checklist of how is it really true? what's telling me whether this is true or not true, kind of fact finding and going through that process to then think about if there's a more productive way to think through something, and then reflecting on how that would make you feel ultimately.
Right.
And so these are just some general cognitive distortions and what the alternative, more rational thought might be behind that distortion, which I love some of these examples, and I won't read them all off, but I'll give you all a minute to read if you're interested, and then we can kind of talk through some of them.
Yeah, I think that these are definitely things that we need to talk to ourselves and use these rational thoughts. It's like, but I think because we live the life that we live and we are caretakers, not just a parent, you're also taking care of somebody that might have some more special needs. These things, these type of thoughts to kind of talk yourself down a little bit.
Yeah.
Definitely help.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I feel like that because I was unable to complete all of the tasks on my to-do list today, my whole day was unproductive. Well, a million things can come up during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Your kid could need extra support on something or has a total meltdown. And it doesn't mean that the whole rest of the day was a wash or that anything bad. It's kind of in those moments, though, I think you're right, Kim, going back to some of these and thinking through and trying to reflect and reframe that to, I'm trying my best. I'm doing the best that I can. Today wasn't perfect, but that's okay.
Right. And not to get upset with yourself if you had a plan of a day, like you planned your day to be a certain way, but then something out of your control took place because your child, got sick or had a seizure or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It totally refocus. You have to stay focused on that task that's just happened and not get upset with yourself that you didn't get to the other things on your list for that plan of that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example of that. And here are just some more, but I think, again, just, and even in sharing this, just for folks who weren't able to attend, to hopefully have as a kind of an example and starting point to think about and recognize some of those statements. And I think, Amy, to what you're saying, there's too much risk involved in trying. There's no point in trying because I know I'll fail. And then it's kind of the challenging that for kids of, well, what if you don't fail? What happens if you're successful with that? Or, if it doesn't go as badly as you thought, or if you actually are good at math. I think a lot of these can be really helpful.
Absolutely.
So this is kind of moving into some more specific stress management strategies that are a little bit more concrete. This was another resource that I think is good. And I don't necessarily I tried to modify some of these from the article itself. I don't necessarily love all of the ways that they worded the headings. But I think really, in terms of setting realistic standards for yourself, it's just giving yourself permission to let go of some of your voluntary commitments, asking for help if you need it, and setting boundaries and saying no when you need to, which is much easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I think that really the gist of setting realistic standards for yourself is kind of the twofold of giving yourself permission to say no and to, not take on as much as you may feel like you need to, and then setting those boundaries and saying no. For limiting stress by admitting your limits, when just going back to accepting that there are some things that we have no control over, which goes back to what Kim was just talking about, and, kind of trying to, instead of maybe dwelling on it or falling into those cognitive distortions, to work to identify some realistic ways we can improve a situation or switch gears and work on something else if it's just not gonna happen. for planning, scheduling, and organizing, just trying to plan out and prioritize tasks you need to get done in a day, breaking down larger tasks into smaller, more manageable tasks, and setting some realistic timelines, or being flexible about timelines and saying, you know what, it's okay that I didn't get to that today, or this can really wait until another day and it's fine. Taking care of your physical needs, which I think when we talk about physical needs kind of in the self-care world and thinking about that, it's a lot of, you know, you should exercise and you need to exercise. But I think the physical needs can range just from personal hygiene of making time to take, you know, your daily shower and brushing your teeth and brushing your hair and whatever, to a solid exercise and nutrition regimen and getting plenty of sleep. So I think really, in the way I conceptualize taking care of your physical needs is doing the best you can to take care of your physical health. And that ultimately, you know, kind of giving yourself some grace and forgiving yourself if you're not able to have a solid exercise and nutrition regimen. And I think just any steps we can take to support our physical needs can help to reduce stress. Making some time to relax, which I think can seem like a fool's errand sometimes, but taking care of your own relaxation needs can help to give a little bit more energy to cope with all of the other demands of life. And again, even just taking a few minutes to take a deep breath or reset can be helpful for that. I think a lot of times relaxation's conceptualized as a day at the spa or a full day off. And sometimes, and I know like, even for me as a busy graduate student, sometimes it's taking 5 minutes just to like sit and take a breath and reset. Right. And that to me is relaxing that day. And I think that's pretty applicable. Acknowledging mistakes, you know, we all make them. And sometimes mistakes can lead to feelings of frustration, inadequacy, embarrassment. And really just simply by kind of, again, going back to admitting that we all have our limits on what we can handle and our capacity to be able to deal with things sometimes, and correcting any wrongs, fixing our mistakes to the best of our ability, or just acknowledging that sometimes, yeah, we're not perfect and we just move on. Right. Instead of focusing on that counterproductive guilt or self-criticism, just kind of, again, giving some forgiveness and grace to yourself. And then I think my favorite is just laugh, making time for humor. It's important in all areas of life, but can really help, I think, within a family to be able to find things to laugh about. Because I mean, I know on some days it's like, if you can't laugh about it, you'll start crying, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yep.
And so sometimes it's just finding the ways to laugh, and get some enjoyment out of things and making the best of things. Yep. Any thoughts about any of these, or ones that particularly resonate, or that any of you feel like are kind of the most key or critical for managing stress?
There's so many to choose from.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think they're all very applicable, but yeah. The taking care of your physical needs, making time to relax, and laughing are my favorite.
Yeah. Me too. I would agree with that.
Having a glass of wine. Sit down and have a glass of wine.
Yes, absolutely. I know. Well, and so many of the articles were like, you know, don't like try not to drink or anything. I'm like, I'm not going to tell people whether or not they can do that, you know?
Well, because it can go the other way. You don't want to tell people to, you know, drink away their problems.
Right.
Right.
But one nice glass of wine and allowing yourself one, you know, half-hour show is nice.
Yes, definitely. All right. So in terms of just like going through some of the more beneficial strategies, the next two are focused more around time management. And so these are actually taken from an article that was written by a mom of 2 kiddos with disabilities. And she manages her children's, I think she said that between her children, they have over, 50 food allergies and sensitivities, and taking supplements, medications, and then managing their IEPs. And so I thought this was a helpful resource in sort of thinking about, and this is just what worked for her given her kids' needs, but I think hopefully some of them can be helpful. So I think just kind of, to the extent possible, creating a master checklist for your day or week, if it helps to kind of look at the week. trying to create something that can be reused, and thinking about, managing any special food diets, supplements, medicines, therapy appointments can be super overwhelming. So having that checklist can kind of free up your mind to take care of your family and know that you're not going to forget any of those details, and kind of having that all in place. Designating a space to store completed schoolwork. And this mom really talked about having this paper box and having kind of everything in one place, that sometimes needing to revisit old school worksheets or helping to remember how they learned a skill, whether it's going back to kind of revisit something and refresh on something, but also giving you some concrete examples of what skills your child needs help with when you go to an IEP meeting, to kind of be able to really provide your thoughts and input around what their educational goals are going to look like. Keeping all of your supplements and all of your children's supplements and medications in one place, just to kind of help keeping organized. Keeping good tax records, just kind of being aware of additional tax benefits for children with special needs, and keeping receipts from supplements, doctor's visits, any schools or special services, foods bought, mileage for each of those events. And again, just like with the school papers, she recommends keeping them in a box so you have them if you need them at any time. Color coding your calendar, kind of making different categories, whether it's by child or by type of appointment. She says that she puts specific appointments in green on her calendar, so that way when she's planning out her week, she knows those are the key things that are not able to be kind of worked around, and so that way no appointments are missed. And she made an interesting point about it then being easier to go back and kind of make a mileage list for taxes if you're thinking about appointments that are kind of taking up some of that mileage. She also recommended, and again, this depends on your child's needs, but buying extra medicine spoons and just kind of having that, or any extra supply that is beneficial for your child's care available, and having extra supplies is helpful. Just kind of what are the items that you run out of, and having extra on hand at all times, so there's not a situation where you're feeling like, oh, I need to get something or I don't have that, just to kind of help streamline and make the day run more smoothly. Mm-hmm. And then this, I think, kind of goes a little bit back to journaling, but in terms of keeping a diary, more specifically, I think like an appointment book, to kind of record how your kid is doing any day, whether there were any foods or medical changes. Kind of, she found, specifically with her children's food allergies and sensitivities, that making a note of what they ate, or when they changed supplements or dosage on a medication, and any unusual behaviors or out of the ordinary behaviors that happened as a result, was really helpful for her in kind of making those decisions, and being able to, when you're working with professionals, and kind of going back and saying, well, I've got the records here of what happened and how my child responded to this, when there may be pushback sometimes, or if there are situations where you're not feeling supported. Any thoughts or reactions to any of these, or do any of you do any of these strategies?
I was huge on keeping a, I called it my log for Rebecca. So I have notebooks full of just anytime a medication change happened, anytime she had a seizure, how long that seizure lasted, I had extensive log notes, I would call them. So basically the keep a diary thing was huge in navigating her.
Yeah.
Yep.
I live and die by my calendar. Color coded, reminders go in there, appointments go in there, just everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And these were just some additional time management strategies. I kind of pulled out the ones that were redundant, but this was another source that I think is helpful in terms of some more of like the care for the caregiver type of thinking about that. So like just scheduling breaks for yourself and actually taking them and following through. I think that can be really hard. And again, there may need to be some flexibility about when those breaks happen, but if you needed those 5 minutes, finding a way to take those at some point during the day, even if it's after the kids go to bed, just taking that time to, again, like kind of relax and reset and refuel. asking for help and delegating whenever possible. So identifying who is in your support network, how they can help if you have the resources to be able to hire, ride sharing apps or grocery delivery, or having, some hired help for cleaning, just like those things that can be really hard to manage if that's something that's feasible and within some resources that you have available, or even if it's family that or friends that live close that could, pick someone up from school or help with transportation or dropping off groceries or some of those logistical things. Taking advantage of technology and really putting that to work. And I think this really goes back to the organization, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this of whether you have any apps or anything that you use to help in addition to a calendar, or if the calendar is online. But this source recommended CareZone and Caring Bridge as 2 apps, and CareZone logs your family members' medications, allergies, and insurance ID cards in one place to kind of have that already. And then Caring Bridge is kind of a communication app, which again goes back to that delegating of helping to coordinate any caregiving duties with relatives who may be helping and keeping track of appointments. Do any of you use any apps or things to help with organization and planning?
Just my online calendar.
Yeah, I've never heard of those 2 that you mentioned, but those
No.
sound very interesting.
No, I had never heard of them either, but I think it is interesting, and more are coming out. So, yeah, I mean, I was actually just looking, I've got a couple of things that I'm working on right now for work, and was like, what is a good way to like manage multiple things at one time? And I'm like, really, the tried and true color-coded calendar is the best way that I can think of to organize. So, but I think in some cases, being able to have all information in one place that's easily accessible can be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Meal planning out meals and prepping them in advance can save time during the week if you have that time to carve out on a weekend to be able to cook, or if you have a slow cooker, planning out some meals that are just kind of a dump in the slow cooker and go and have it be ready at night. So it's any of those ways that can help to save time. And then keeping organized, having, kind of a place for everything so that it's easier to find and helps keep things running a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah. I do feel that organization helps keep your mind a little more clear. When things are messy and out of whack, then that's when, it's very hard to think clearly. So
Yeah.
organization
Yeah.
and
And to
keeping,
stay on top of everything, right? Just remembering like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and it's one less thing to think about. Oh, well, where is this thing? Where is that pill bottle? Where is that, school supply? Where's that paper? Just to have everything it takes that step out of having to think about that and be having to deal with that as well. It can just be a lot more automatic,
Absolutely.
which is really great.
Yep.
Again, sometimes easier said than done to get that system up and running, but once it's there, it's really nice to have. Any other thoughts or time management strategies that any of you use or find to be really helpful?
I was going to say I use the Cozy family calendar. It syncs across different devices, and so you can have your spouse could be off at a doctor's appointment and that person can log in an appointment, and you're all in the same place, but you each have a different color.
Oh yeah.
And the free functions, the free part of it, I've never had to upgrade it because it's actually got enough bells and whistles of reminders and having everybody's master calendar be the same calendar.
What's
and
it
right
called?
in your pocket. It's called Cozy, COZI.
Oh, that's
Cozy.
great.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful shared calendar system,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I know. I think it's, I always have liked to keep track of stuff on paper, but I find, especially now, just even in the last 8 weeks with the shift to technology, it's like, I feel like being able to just have it in your pocket on your phone and be able to look at it instead of having to kind of sift through papers or flip through a book can be really nice. I mean, there's definite advantages to pen and paper. but that sounds like a really great resource. Awesome. Okay. So these are just a couple of resources that, again, Kim graciously shared that were helpful. So this first one is really just, it's a literal alphabet of coping skills that can be helpful. There's a lot of things that I think are helpful for both adults and kids, that each letter of the alphabet has different coping skills that begin with that letter. So like B is breathe slowly and L is listen to music. So there's different things like that that kind of, again, taking that active thought process out of it as a tool to be able to go and look back at, or even for ideas. Some of them I think would be just really good, especially now, ideas of activities to do or things to, you know, kind of if you're bored, you could do one of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a visual of that or no?
Let me see if I can.
Because it's just thought provoking. You know, you just look at the different letters of the alphabet, and like you just said, you know, it just kind of gives you like a quick reference to, you know, listen to music, you know, stop for a minute,
right?
You know,
let me see. I think I can switch my screen sharing and pull that up.
Yeah, I just thought it was a really kind of cool resource to have. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, can you all see it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you just said, ideas for activities to do even with your with your kiddos.
Yep.
Bounce a stress ball, you know.
Yeah.
All different kinds of things here.
Yeah, and there's so many, which is great. I love that laugh is on there.
Yep. Laugh, hug a friend.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hug a friend again.
I know. Oh, I know.
Have a party. What is that? Except for house party. But the house party.
I know. I was thinking about that, Kim, when I was looking back at this to refresh on this resource. I was like, oh, well, it's a bummer. A lot of these we can't do right now. We can't go to the gym right now. We can't.
I know.
You know, but
we'll get there. We'll get there. Positive thinking.
Yeah.
Right? Positive
yes,
thinking.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, but I'm amazed even that they were able to find 3 for Z. Zigzag around the room.
Zumba. Well, now it can be have a Zoom meeting with friends.
Right. Yes, definitely. Okay. Here we go. So I think it's back on the presentation, right?
Yes,
so I'll actually prepare to do that for the next one. So this next one is, oops. That's not going to let me. Maybe I need to exit out of this. I will stop. I do. Oh, here, if I click it here, I will do it. Okay. Even though I've gotten pretty good at Zoom over the last 2 months, there's still these little things that I'm still learning. Okay. So I think you can see, can you see this now?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is just, yeah. So this is just from the American Heart Association, and it's just another good, quick one that's, I think, easy for, to be able to share with other people, which is nice.
Yeah.
I love, again, laugh it up, consistent thing.
Mm-hmm.
Get connected, get organized, practice giving back, which I think that's a good one. Even if it's giving back by providing some support to, even just like listening to a friend, like volunteering is really nice, but that's also something to carve out time for. So, I mean, if you're able to do that, that's great. But I think even just being able to be a sounding board for a friend or family member and provide some support to somebody can be a really good way to give back and feel positive and kind of reap the benefits of that. And I like ending on leaning into the things that you can change, of focusing on what's within our control and being able to do something that we have control over, because there's so much that we don't have control over. And so being able to kind of find something that we do and reap the benefits of that, and of feeling like we're able to be in control of something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I like all of these.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because I think it's just a nice quick resource to be able to use. Okay, let me see if I can. Oh, what's happening? Okay. So is it on the notes or on the?
You're back to the self-care resources.
Okay.
You're full screen. Yep.
Okay. And so then this last one, this is just an article, so I won't show that one, but it's just about some different ways that you can lean on your support network or some ideas for how to make some connections. I think as an adult and especially as a parent of kids with disabilities, it can be really hard to make connections with new people if you don't already have friends in your area or have people that you know. And I think like a special education PTA is a great way for folks to find other people and be able to build some of those connections. And so kind of leaning into that and figuring out who can really be your network and supports in that.
Yeah, we actually formed a support group within the PTA.
That's great.
You know, we started out with just the PTA meetings and the speakers, and then now we also have meetings. Well, we did before this whole quarantine situation, but where parents could come and just talk, just, you know, for support. So I think just us being in this PTA is part of us giving back and volunteering our time and looking for emotional support from others that experience the same things that we do.
Yep, I agree.
Which is great. And I wish more schools had that as a resource. And, you know, because if your kids are all in school together or in the same district, it's nice to have a local set of people that you can lean on and rely on and get support from.
Yeah, and I think the exchange of information is so helpful of just different people who are, you know, this is what I'm experiencing, and somebody else in the room is like, oh, this is who you should talk to, or I know how you feel. You know, that's just really,
it helps to make you feel like you're not alone, and that you can, you know, that somebody else is going to get it or have information that will be useful to you.
Right.
You know, if you're going to a regular PTA meeting, that's not always, you know, there's just different subjects that they don't cover that we would need to cover, you know, that we're involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that was really, I wasn't sure, you know, depending on how many people came, how much discussion we'd want to have, but